Hey everybody, it's me, Kevin Wormhold here on The Exchange. We are live. We are live on our live stream. It is Monday, 7 p.m. Thank you very much for tuning in, guys. And I want to thank my subscribers who are always with me. Thank you. We got a great episode coming up this week. But before we get to the episode, I need the people who have not subscribed yet to do that now. Subscribe, hit the bell so you get all notifications to the episode. What it does is it helps me continue to bring guests to you for free. Okay, all it is a little button push. It doesn't cost you anything. The more subscribers, the more likes, more comments, the more I can bring you free episodes of the podcast here on YouTube. Okay, YouTube is a tough grind, but as long as you guys keep supporting me here on YouTube, we keep coming, bringing you these episodes on YouTube. If you're not into the video thing, there is an audio link in every episode to the audio version of the podcast. So consider clicking that, going to whichever platform you prefer to use, and subscribe there. And you can just listen to it on your way into work. Not a big deal. But if you're here tuning in, let's get to our episode coming up. We have a great episode this week, as usual. And thank you for joining me here on The Exchange. Welcome. Enjoy the show. I am here today joined by Brian Nichols. Brian Nichols from the Liberty-based show, the Brian Nichols Show. Thank you very much for joining me, dude.
Absolutely. Cheers. Thank you.
I keep up to date on everything you do, and something that I don't think you know, when I came on your show about 9 months ago, it was my first ever podcast.
Really?
Yeah, that was my first podcast going on, and I start taking notes. I make sure I got all my facts straight, and then I'm getting a little nervous around game time. I said, you know what? I need a beer. So I drank a beer. And then I realized I only had one beer in the fridge. And what was next was my gin and tonic that was sitting on the counter.
Okay.
I decided to start drinking gin and tonic during our interview. And I can tell you by the end of that interview, the notes on my page started getting real fuzzy. So I don't know if it was anything, but I started to drift off towards the end as far as my concentration. But ever since then, I've been doing podcasts nonstop. You sent me down the rabbit hole of where I just have to get involved in podcasts. So thank you.
Cool. No, absolutely. You know, it's a lot of fun to know that my show's reaching out to people that I probably wouldn't have been able to meet otherwise. I mean, not only to meet you, but just the number of people that not only have I reached out to as guests, but also people that, you know, who listen to the show. And that's just, it's really cool to see that what I've been able to do, and really my goal is to reach out to people and try to spread the message of liberty to people, you know, from the left, from the right, from the center, really just get the message out there, right? So to know that it's having an impact, it actually kind of reassures me, like, okay, this is why you're doing this. This is, you know, part of the reason. Yeah, it's nice to see download numbers. It's nice to get, you know, really cool guests on, but like to actually reach new people, that's the most exciting part. So to see it actually inspired you to do your own thing, that's pretty cool too.
Yeah, definitely hooked me. So now I'm hooked. Another thing that I got hooked on was watching your keto journey. You've been posting a lot on social media, Twitter, on your Facebook page, about your journey with keto. You've lost a ton of weight. Tell me a little bit about that.
So it's funny. Nothing really changed besides, I mean, number one, obviously doing keto, but also I got diagnosed with celiac disease. So my dad's had celiac disease for around 10 years or so, and I knew it was one of those ticking time bombs because it's all genetic. So beginning of this past year, I had noticed like I blown up, and I really didn't have a reason why. I was going to the gym, exercising. I was doing, you know, all my weightlifting and stuff still. I was hitting my good reps and getting good weight up there. But I kept on blowing up, and I was inflamed, and my joints were killing me. And I said, you know, I think I need to cut out bread, just cut out gluten in general, because I think I might be having some type of, you know, celiac reaction to things. So I kind of just did this on my own. And I said, you know, I'm doing this, might as well just do something like keto. That could help, you know, along the way, just hopefully get some of the inflammation on my system. So I cut out all gluten, and I really did restrict my carbs quite a bit. I still will eat, you know, probably 20 to 50 grams of carbs a day, somewhere in that realm. But really the cutting out the bread was the main thing. So since January, I really focused on just, you know, trying to eat healthier. And I ended up dropping like 90 pounds or so, which was wild. I didn't think that would have that much of an impact. But what was really cool is that not only was I able to keep on doing the things I was doing physically, but I saw an improvement not only in my reps, like my max reps, but also max weights I was putting up. So that was kind of reassuring to see, number one. Number two, my joints started to feel so much better. So I got, bum shoulder from football, neck injuries, knee injuries. And there was always, I'd wake up in the morning and I'd be just in excruciating pain. And I came to realize a lot of that problem, not only just with the re-existing injury, but ended up being a lot of inflammation that was in my systems. So to get the inflammation out and to actually have the ability to have free range of motion. And that was like huge for me to see the ability to do things I hadn't been able to do in 5 years or so. So yeah, I can't believe how well I've adapted to keto. And actually, I got officially diagnosed with celiac back in August, so it kind of reaffirmed, okay, I was doing this for the right reason. But now there's no accidents like, oh, I accidentally had flour in that soup. Whatever. Now it's like, oh, I have flour in my soup. I know it's going to really mess with my system for like 4 or 5 days. So yeah, long story short, it's been a really cool journey. I never thought I'd be on like this keto train. I was never really big, pick a certain diet and stick to it. But it's not even as much a diet so much as it's just changing your lifestyle.
Right.
And I think one misconception people have is that it's really restrictive. It's not. Like I made keto pizza last night, and is it pizza? No. And I get it. It's not real pizza, but it's pizza, and it tastes really good, and you can add a lot of great flavor to things. So I think people just need to kind of get out of their bubble, get out of that comfort zone they have, and just give new things a try. But yeah, I'm glad to see that you're on that train too, and I think you're going to find a lot of you'll feel better, and your mind will be clearer too.
My second. So let me tell you what happened. So my wife is she's a vegan mostly. So she's on the vegan diet. I did the vegan diet for a little bit, but I didn't see much change in my weight. And I'm a lot more busy with work and doing podcasts.
Oh yeah, for sure.
I got 3 kids. So my workout schedule is shrunken down to like 3 days a week.
Yep.
So I put on a lot of weight, and then I started the keto. And going from like a vegan style to a keto is complete opposite. It's like
it's completely different.
Fat and everything. It's like, let me give it a shot. I lost 20 pounds quick.
Yeah.
Like within like almost maybe a month and a half, I'm down 20 pounds.
That's awesome.
Then I got, you know what? I'm going to have a little pizza. I'm going to cheat a little bit here and there. And then I just went back to norming and I gained it again. So now I'm on day 4 of my second round of keto. But it really does change. It makes it a huge impact. A lot of people I work with are doing keto as well. They lost a lot of weight. And
did you notice like the mental clarity that comes with it too?
I thought I noticed that I sleep better.
Yeah. 100%.
Less sinus problems. And like it really does change your body and mobility. There were mornings I would wake up, my feet hurt. Now I don't have that problem anymore. I wear dress shoes to work and everything. So my feet get, but when you're on that style diet and you're actually taking a lot of that gluten and that stuff that really is bad for you.
No, it is.
It really is terrible. And we think it's okay and we should give it to our kids and everything else. And we don't realize that there is this impact down the road.
And what's wild is it's in everything. I mean, when I go to the grocery store, just not just keto, but just like looking at like just gluten in general, it's hidden as a binder, as a filling agent in everything. So like I have to meticulously go through and like look to make sure that there's no snuck in gluten in things. And I mean, like for example, I was going to get sushi the other day, and I was at the grocery store. And I'm thinking, sushi, it's salmon, rice, and like a couple of vegetables. It should be fine. And I was like, oh, I should probably look at the back. Thank God I did, because they use flour to bind the rice together to make like the rice cake. And I'm like, I would have never guessed that. I would have eaten that and not have thought anything of it. And lo and behold, it would have made me sick for a week. So, I mean, I think it's the hardest part isn't so much eating the food. It's doing the research to make sure that you're not accidentally putting things in your body. That not just for celiac disease, but also just for keto in general, because you really have to pay attention to the hidden carbs. So if I make gluten-free keto pizza last night, and I had to make sure that the sauce I got not only was gluten-free, but I want to make sure there's no added sugar and stuff, because you want to keep your carbs lower in the sauce. So like those little things that people wouldn't really think about, you really have to pay attention to just to be safe.
And, I never thought that I would even like to go on. Like, I love bread. I love pizza. I live in New York.
Oh, yeah.
You can't live. There's a pizza parlor in every corner here. So it's not like, I can't get away from it. And it's a real struggle to get through. Like, let me get one slice and I got it. Did you get the flu when you get the keto? they thought.
I actually just recovered from the actual flu like a week ago.
But I had the keto flu the first time I did it for like the first 3 days. I was like cold sweats and shaking and like.
Well, because what you're doing is you're actually changing the entire way that your body is taking in fuel. So one thing that people forget is that when you're eating, what you're eating, the reason is your body needs fuel to go. So there's two real ways that your body uses the fuel. Number one, they use the carbs that you come into your system. That's kind of the way that we live as Americans, and just 2019 in general, is we are a carb-based fuel human, and we're eating these high sugars, high carb foods, and that's the fuel for our it burns the glucose in our systems, and that's what makes the engine go. Whereas when you're in a keto diet, it's entirely based on fat. So you're trying to increase the use of fat and lower the use of carbs. So then when your body gets carbs, it's more of like that's a little extra boost. Whereas instead of you're going from to a fat-based fuel, then it's constantly looking for that fuel, and it will start to use your residual fat in your body. And then it just changes the way that you're running the engine. So I think people need to get back to the idea of food being fuel and try to think what best fuel you're going to put into your body. I mean, if you're putting crap into your car, is it going to run as well? Probably not, versus like the higher premium stuff. But at the same point in time, you still need to make sure you're getting fuel in. So I never would say restrict it to the point, like if you're eating salads and stuff, right? Yeah, there are going to be some more carbs because of the vegetables, but to the contrary, I would take a little bit gain in the carbs from fruits and vegetables than carbs from a candy bar. Right. It's also the type of carbs you're putting into your body. So yeah, I'm all on board the keto train, but I think it's good also for people to remember that you can still live your life, right? Like Thanksgiving's coming up, Christmas is coming up. It's time for the holidays. Like live. Like I just got married 2 weeks ago. Like when I went to my wedding. Thank you. Yeah. Thank you. But like when I got married, like, did I really care about keto that day? No, not really. Gluten-free, I had to, but yeah, just live your life too. Don't get stuck into this mindset of like you have to be perfect every single day, because then it's a nightmare. Like you have to be a person.
Right. And it's in the way society is today. There's a lot more sitting down, a lot less activities in the day. Everybody's doing things using technology. So that added all that bread and gluten and stuff, and the less mobility, because people aren't moving around like they were 20, 30 years ago.
Oh,
people
for sure.
Hammering it away.
Right.
Everything's done a lot lazier. So it's important. And I recommend the keto diet. A lot of people say, "Oh, it sounds terrible for you," but it really does make a difference. You're an example of it.
Thank you, sir.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Continue your journey. I'm on it now for the second time. Hopefully, I stick with it.
All right. Well, I'll be your accountability partner. Sound fair?
Sounds good. So, let's talk about the Brian Nichols journey. You have a podcast where you interview people from you don't just interview libertarians.
Yep.
You interview people from outside. I've heard you interview socialist, democratic socialist from New York one time. And I think that's a great idea, because there's not enough engagement between people who disagree.
Yep.
And it's okay to disagree. And we've become the society that if you don't agree with me, we're not allowed to be friends.
You're a bad person.
Right. And I think that's the wrong idea. So I like your show for that reason. And that's why I'm a fan, tuned in, and I thankfully for you inviting me on. It was a great experience.
No, for sure.
But your movement in the liberty movement, I guess you would call it, because you call it the liberty movement.
Yep.
Tell me about it. Tell me how you got into, like, I want to start a podcast to bring people together and discuss freedom.
Yeah. So it really, my true like journey into liberty didn't really begin, I'll say 2012, and it was after the 2012 election, because at that point in time I was pretty much like a tried and true rock red Republican. That was what I grew up in. I was college Republicans president for 3 years, I think it was. So like I was rah GOP, and I watched as Mitt Romney lost, and I was kind of curious. I was like, why did people my age not like Mitt Romney? And a lot of people, when I talked to them, mind you, this is in 2012, they said, I would have voted for him. I like his economic stuff. But the social stuff I didn't like that. And that made me really think. I was like, okay, we need a new Republican Party where it's people who are fiscally responsible and socially accepting. So I ended up, what I thought was called the New Age Republicans. And then I started to do some research into people like Rand Paul. And I'm thinking, I'm hearing this guy speak on the House floor. I'm sorry, on the Senate floor, and I'm like, I like a lot of the stuff he's saying, not only about spending, but also about reeling back the surveillance state, and he's talking about ending foreign wars. And I'm like, oh, that's an interesting way to think about things. So I started to do some more research, and then I started going down this rabbit hole of libertarianism, right? You go from Rand Paul on the Senate floor talking about, ending the NSA mass surveillance program. So all of a sudden you're learning about, Henry Hazlitt and Murray Rothbard and Frederick Hayek, and you're like, oh, how did I end up here at 3 a.m? So I ended up kind of transitioning during that time period into more of a liberty Republican, I'll say, much more on board with the Thomas Masseys, the Justin Amash's, Mike Lee, Rand Pauls of the world, than I was before, of like the Chris Christie's of the world, and the Marco Rubios. I mean, I remember back, I went to CPAC in 2012 or 2013. It was after Marco Rubio did the response to the State of the Union, and there was that whole infamous thing where he reached off to the side to grab a cup of water and drink it. So I was at CPAC, and I ended up winning a Marco Rubio signed water canister that I still have to this day. But I'm thinking, like, I remember back then I was like, oh yeah, this is the best thing ever, because Marco Rubio is like the best thing ever. And then I'm looking at him now, I'm like, ugh, another John McCain, basically, is what it feels like. So I ended up, I got much more involved in just looking at liberty, through the lens of not only people running for office, but also just as an ideology. And I kind of got more and more involved with more libertarian minded people on the internet. In 2015, I really started to focus on supporting Rand Paul. And I got very involved with people within his campaign and grassroots supporters. And I was really promoting Rand Paul, especially because of his libertarian beliefs that he has. Now, I know a lot of people don't like Rand Paul right now, especially because of his interactions with Trump, which I get. But I definitely think it's just Rand. He's trying to play politics to promote liberty the best he can. And I think, you look at the number of wars we've been in since Trump's been president, which is minor. I will say that he's doing some good stuff when you had people like John Bolton and Lindsey Graham who have been really tugging at Trump's ear.
I think you need to give him credit when it's due.
100%.
Tell him he's an ass when he's an ass. That's okay. and people just we don't have to be the evil person because you like one thing he does or two things he does.
Right.
It's become so divisive. Just mentioning his name, people lose their minds.
Well, it's because it's Trump, right? And that's kind of what happened back in 2015. I'll be the first one to admit I had a lot of problems with Trump in 2015. And I actually kind of look back at the way I approached Trump, and I'm like, that was a little icky because I was so just against him and so for Rand Paul that I look at people now who are either in this in love with Trump mentality or he's the Antichrist mentality, and I almost kind of feel disappointed in myself looking back in 2015 because I was almost in that kind of mindset because I was so on board with Rand Paul. But also looking at the policies that Trump had promoted in the past. And it really made me nervous to think that this could be the guy that the GOP was going to pick to be, the face of either being a Republican or being a conservative or a libertarian. And myself being still a part of the GOP at that time, I was really nervous to what that would do to the future. So I was, 100% in for Rand Paul. And then when he ended up dropping out in early 2016, I'm thinking to myself, I can't support Trump and nobody else running. It was like Ted Cruz, John Kasich, and another forgettable person who were still running at the time. And, I was like, who can I look to as an alternative? And I got more involved in the libertarian movement as, looking for a true alternative from a party perspective. And I kind of came across Austin Peterson. And I'd heard Austin, do some talks online. I, listened in some live streams. I really liked what he was promoting, and he was running to reach out to people on the right, more of a, fiscal conservative would, but he was running with the libertarian principles. And he actually got a lot of support from people like Glenn Beck and Eric Erickson. I think Liz Mayer endorsed him. And I was like, okay, this is the alternative. And I, 100% was advocating for Austin Peterson during the 2016 primary for the Libertarian Party. Say primary, it's, running up to the convention where they'd vote. Right. And as we all know, it ended up that Gary Johnson ended up taking the mantle there as the leader of the Libertarian Party.
The safe bet.
The Libertarians are socially liberal and fiscally conservative. Gary Johnson. Yeah. But I ended up, I said, okay, I'm going to support Gary Johnson. Got very involved not only in supporting Gary Johnson, but then I ended up, post Austin's campaign, getting involved with his organization, Libertarian Republic, as a writer. And that was really kind of the start of my libertarian media experience and kind of growing myself within the movement. So, I was writing articles and I was writing op-eds quite frequently, and ended up, I was given the opportunity by Austin to do what was called the Around the Republic podcast. And really what I would do was I would have one of the other writers for the Libertarian Republic come on my show once a week, and we'd kind of do a week in review. And we would look at all the major stories that happened throughout the week and just kind of go through articles that were written at TLR and discuss them and, give the libertarian twist on what's been taking place throughout, the past week. And that lasted for about, a solid 3-4 months or so. And I also was given the opportunity to do an interview part of that show where I had Cliff Maloney Jr. on, I had John Ziegler, Super Mexican over from, I think, Hot Air, and a few others. And I really enjoyed that because I got to ask these people who were noted people within not only the conservative movements, but also libertarian movements, ask them for their opinions, ask them for their experiences to give, kind of commentary on what was not only happening in the world, but also to learn more about what got them into the movement. And it was a really great opportunity just to use a medium that I was comfortable with. I had radio back in college. And to be able to kind of go back to that medium that I was so comfortable with was really nice to do. And I ended up, as also being part of TLR, getting invited onto We Are Libertarians from Chris Spangle, which is one of the largest libertarian podcasting networks that are out there. And to be on the show with him was a lot of fun. And he's got a great cast of folks over there and contributors over at We Are Libertarians. So I became kind of a reoccurring guest on the show. I did about 4 or 5 episodes. And then it came around the end of 2017, and I had reached out to Chris, and I said, I would love to kind of transition from doing this, Around the Republic podcast to actually doing my own thing. And I think I'd want to do more of an interview-based show because I'm finding I'm getting a lot of value out of doing that. And Chris said, well, how about this? We'll make a show on the We Are Libertarians network. You'll be the host, and kind of be your thing as I'm part of the umbrella of We Are Libertarians. I said, sure, let's rock and roll and do it. So I transitioned at the end of 2017 to start 2018 as now, a part of the We Are Libertarians network. Still, I'm an associate editor over at TLR, so I'm still doing stuff over there, but really changing my primary focus to being, the host of my own show. And it took a little bit to kind of get the ball rolling in terms of how I want to promote the show and how I want to focus the show. And around, I'd say it was probably 2 months in or so, I had an interview with Dean Clancy, who was the former, I think he's the vice president of Freedom Works back in the day, but also he was a former member of the Reagan administration. And to have him on the show and really ask him a lot of detailed, pointed questions, not only about the liberty movement, but also just kind of applying it to the grand scheme of things, the political structure that we have in place here in America. I found that to have a lot of value, not only to myself, but I saw that in the feedback from the audience, people reaching out to me saying that was a great interview. That was one of my that was my highest downloaded episode at that point in time. So I said, I think this is going to be the focus for the show, is having people on my show to really focus on their area of expertise and bring that to my audience, and hopefully leave my audience, as I say in my show, feeling educated, enlightened, and informed. And that kind of was the beginning of this journey now, where I'm having people from the far left to the far right, having libertarians, conservatives, independents all on my show, and really asking them questions to just learn more. And that's kind of the basic, I guess, the basic foundation of my show, is that I want to have people on to express not only what they believe, but how they got to where they believe, what they believe. And I think that's important because it allows people to see themselves in our guests. So, for example, I had Steffi Cole on my show, and Steffi is well known over at Libertarian Republic World, working with Austin. And she started out her liberty journey from the left, right? And conversely, I know I started my liberty journey from the right. So I think it's good to have people like her tell her story, because that's how we reach out to people who are also on the left. And people to hear people like myself and other conservatives who became libertarians, to hear their story, because then at the other side of the table you can bring more people from the right in. And I think one, I'll kind of conclude with this, is one problem that we've had in the liberty movement is that we look at people on the left and the right as just enemies, and we try to completely section them out. Whereas what we should be doing is trying to figure out how can we reach out to these people and bring them into the liberty movement, number one. And then once they're here, keep them here and educate them, help them, grow. And I think it's unrealistic for us to say that once they're here, they're going to instantaneously be perfect libertarians. That's not how it works. You have to give them a chance to grow. We have to give them a chance to learn. So, don't initially, when you have somebody who's new to the movement, say you're not a real libertarian. Sure, they might not be at this point, but they'll get there. And it's going to be more beneficial to teach them instead of lecturing them. It's going to be more beneficial to nurture them through this movement versus trying to shun them and push them away. And that's what we try to do at my show. So then you mentioned the show I had with the Democratic Socialist. I mean, really, honestly, Kevin, the reason I had him on my show wasn't to try to change his mind. It was that I knew he was going to share the show with Democratic Socialists. And I knew that was an opportunity for me to reach them, because they otherwise wouldn't have heard me. And when I'm able to reach out to them in that medium, it shows that we're not the caricature that's promoted on the corporate media. It's not the caricature that's promoted by the left and the right. You get to see a real person having a real conversation and trying to have a fundamental means of finding some common ground. And it might even just like plant the tiniest of seeds. But I planted the seed there, and that's the most important thing, is that a year, 2 years, 3 years, that seed will start to grow, and they're going to see things that they heard in the show start to appear, and it's going to make them question their own beliefs. And that's all I can really ask for. Not only just people on the left, but on the right as well, to make them question their own beliefs, question why they believe what they believe and how they got to where they believe, and say, does this objectively make sense? And just to hear, I've had dozens of people reach out to me privately saying, I listened to your show. I came in, as a, staunch conservative, and now I find myself more of as a conservatarian. To me, that's a win. I had a socialist reach out to me and say, oh my God, like I used to look at things this way, and it's like a completely new world. That's a win. So, I mean, I think that's what we have to do, and actually to grow the movement beyond the, 3, 4, 5% max that we've been, across the United States. In order to grow, we have to reach new people, and hopefully shows that, like I have and what you've been doing, we're making a difference. We're actually bringing some new people in.
And I could relate to that for the fact that my first show, American Liberty, which was my first venture on my own with my own podcast, was pretty much strictly, I had a couple of Republican candidates for office on, but mostly libertarians. Mm-hmm. I wanted to start this new show, The Exchange, to obviously interact and have conversations with people from outside, not just politics.
Right.
Because I'm going to talk to somebody later this afternoon that has nothing to do with politics. It's about his recovery from addiction. And obviously that's going to draw people in to listen to his story. Yeah. And at the same time, maybe they'll pick up on a couple of episodes with yourself, and it all flows in together. I'd rather it all connect where people could get different ideas and then make their choice.
Well, what's funny is that I actually was talking to one of my buddies here, and he'll keep his name nameless because he does have a show. But we were talking up the side once, and he had mentioned how, he's like, oh, I have to compete with you and this person. I'm like, don't look at it that way, man. Like, look at it as we're all part of this larger family of liberty-loving people, whether you're a conservative who is leaning libertarian or you're a libertarian who is a staunch anarchist, right? But we're all part of this liberty journey together. And what's important to remember is that my voice might reach a certain group of people, but their voice and their perspective, or your voice and your perspective, is reaching an entirely different group of people, because what you're saying, or the way you're saying it, or the way you do your show, it resonates with them. So we need more voices in the liberty movement. Don't look at your fellow podcasters or your fellow media personalities in the liberty movement as competitors. Look at them as allies, not for our individual movements ourselves and trying to promote our shows, but what's the real goal here, right? Promote liberty. Try to bring more people into the movement. The more shows that have different voices and different perspectives. I mean, there's libertarian shows that are about music. There's libertarian shows about art and food, and I'm like, who listens to those? And then people must be listening to them because they have good audiences. So there's a whole group of people that I probably won't be able to reach, because I'm not going to do a libertarian cooking show, nor do I know how to do a libertarian cooking show.
Steffi Cole would be that example. She does little videos of book reviews, and then she'll do cooking, and then it's all like liberty based, and she brings in different people, and then you've had her on, I've had her on my other show. So like now people are like, oh, well, let's see, who's Brian Nichols? Let's see what he talks about. So there's that connection. That's why I feel it's important.
100%.
Just engage with people. It's okay.
Yes.
We don't have to agree. And that's been lost in today's media.
100%.
And we can't be friends. I mean, you could just look at that show, The View, that's on that I only catch highlights. I don't watch it, but I catch the highlights on social media.
It's
and
painful,
it's just
man.
like it's brutal. I mean, Tulsi Gabbard, I like some of her policies. I don't agree with everything.
Yep.
I'm interested in, and I want to hear more of her. And when she was on that show, she got berated, and you know, they're all agreeing with what Hillary said, and you know, like, you know, I mean, it's just so. She's a major in the United States Army.
Yep.
She's still in the military serving, and you're gonna trash her and call her a Russian asset.
Dude,
I mean,
it's always easy to attack a straw man argument. I mean,
right.
that's if you're building up a straw man argument to then take down it, of course you're going to have a chance to do it. I mean, that's what Hillary Clinton did when she was calling Tulsi Gabbard a Russian stooge. And that's why going back to like having people like Tulsi on a show, like, you know, if I could have Tulsi Gabbard on my show, that would be, you know, one of my favorite guests ever, because I think it'd be good to see how Tulsi, explain to me how you got to this position, right? Because, you know, looking at like she was on John Stossel's show, right?
Yes.
And she was being asked questions about like, how did you get to your conclusion about, you know, universal education? And then John Stossel, you know, pushed her on, well, what about the administrative costs in college? Like, that's where a lot of the added costs come from. And she acknowledged, she's like, yeah, no, that's 100% one of the main issues. So like, she identifies similar problems that we see as libertarians. Now I want to see how she gets to those conclusions. When she goes on shows like The View, they're having her on the show ready to just destroy. They have a narrative in mind. It's like what's her name when she had Jordan Peterson on her show? I forget her name, the English lady over there, where she had Jordan Peterson on her show, and she basically was saying every question she was asking is, so what you're saying is, and she presented his argument in her frame of mind versus actually letting him present his argument.
Right.
And you know, that I think for me was kind of like the aha moment for my show, is I realized like, oh, see, that's a thing. That ignited Jordan Peterson's career, because people saw exactly what happens with a corporate media who's trying to promote a certain narrative, and then the actual truth of what the person's trying to say. So Jordan Peterson has a, you know, certain belief set that was trying to be caricatured by the media, and then it was being asked by these certain questions in a leading manner. So what you're saying is, you know, with women, and he should go off on some tangent, you know, about women inequality, and that he's going against that. And he's like, no, that's not what I said at all. And he'd do his little Kermit the Frog voice, and he'd actually explain what he actually believes. And that was like an aha moment. Like, okay, now this is opening the door. People are showing that they have this desire to have these conversations. People actually learn what they believe, and then, you know, go after the arguments, go after the merits and the true root of these beliefs, instead of attacking these caricatures. Because I think that's one of the things we're seeing right now is the left will set up a caricature of what the right believes, and the right will set up a caricature of the left believes, and they're battling each other against the caricatures instead of actually trying to, you know, fundamentally talk about what does the left believe, like on a foundational level. What does the right believe on a foundational level? Now let's discuss those. And instead of discussing, you know, everybody on the right is a racist, as the left would say, or everybody on the left is, you know, trying to destroy the, you know, American family, let's just say, right? Instead of going after those caricatures, actually discuss those fundamental differences, and that will be more productive. That's why Joe Rogan's so successful right now, because
Right.
he's having people on, and he's giving them hour, 2, 3 hours
Right.
to explain what they believe, not here's what you believe based on my beliefs of what you believe. Here's why you're wrong. Defend yourself, right?
And then
That doesn't work.
and you're only getting 30 seconds to defend yourself too.
Yeah.
So like, explain your entire policy on this in 30 seconds. Go. And it's like,
Yeah.
I can't.
No.
I need 30 minutes at least. You know, like, and they never get that opportunity. That's why the mainstream. I barely watch TV anymore.
I don't watch TV.
You know,
I can't.
I stick. You know, I'll do my Netflix shows and movies,
Mhm.
but that's about it.
Yeah.
So your success within your show has brought you to an association with the Libertarian Party. I've noticed on a couple episodes. Yep, and you're wearing the Libertarian Party shirt. You mentioned that you are now a supporter of the party. You're a member of the party, and you advocate people to join the party.
Yes.
Now, I have. I'm relatively new in involvement with the libertarian movement, but I've seen from the outside looking in how some people could go, it
Yes.
looks a little crazy.
They wouldn't be wrong.
Right. What is your, I guess, for showing a uniting message
Yep.
within the party, showing that there are quality candidates? There are a few, but I think there are some great ones like Larry Sharp that needs to be copy and pasted into
Everywhere. Yes.
And how do we, I guess, get more talent to the pool to send out for the next election cycle?
Well, let's start here, right? I was one of, if not the loudest critics of the Libertarian Party pretty much for the first year and a half of my show. And one of the running themes I had was nobody will take the Libertarian Party seriously until the Libertarian Party takes itself seriously, right? And then I started to really think about, okay, well, how can I make the Libertarian Party take itself seriously? And I really came to the conclusion that the best way to do that is to lead by example, to put my money where my mouth is and get involved into the party and try to make some substantive changes from the inside out. And looking at someone like a Todd Hagopian, who's running for Libertarian Party chair, who has an actual vision for what he's going to do in terms of rebranding the party, trying to professionalize the party and then focus on local elections to bring, like you mentioned, those talented people into the movement. That gave me hope. I'm thinking, okay, we have a real path to credibility. So, how do we?
He has experience,
yes,
Todd, and that is his job.
Yes,
is to go into failing businesses, which the Libertarian Party is a failing business.
Yes,
I mean, you just had the highest percentage of votes for Libertarian in 2016, but yet the amount of money that the party has brought in has gone down.
Yes.
So there's a problem there with branding and management, and he is a guy that comes in, fixes a company, makes it profitable, and then leaves.
Yes.
I'm cool with that. Come in, fix the party, make it profitable, and then if you want to stay, but eventually you're going to leave, and then hopefully it sustains itself and gets better and better.
Right.
That is the right move. And I listened to that episode. That was a great episode, and he's actually coming on in December. I have.
Awesome. Todd, that's the thing that Todd really mentioned, though, that was the most exciting, was a focus on local elections, because there's been a misconception, I think, just across the board for the Libertarian Party's focus. And that's been when we have these national elections that we focus more of our resources and our time and energy on them. So, for example, Gary Johnson in 2016, right? Yes, he was promoted as the alternative to Trump or Hillary. But we still didn't get a lot of votes because, relative to 2012, we got, 4% more or 3% more, something like that. No. I'm sorry. We got like 1.5%. Now we got to like 3%. So we doubled it, which is great. But then we saw the numbers drop right off, 2 years later. So what we need to focus more on is electing local libertarians to their respective communities and trying to show the value of what we're promoting on a daily basis to our communities at large, because nobody's going to take a libertarian view on taxes or war or name libertarian position. I don't care, whatever it may be. Nobody's going to really take those seriously until they can see how it applies to them in their daily lives. And the reality is, the most direct form of government that interacts with you on a daily basis is your local government. And I actually use this example on my friend Caleb Franz's show, The Liberty, where I said, think about when we have a government shutdown. What happens? You can't go to parks. You can't go federal parks, mind you. You can't go to federal lands. The White House shuts down their tours. You can't tour the Capitol building. What happens when your local government shuts down? What happens when your buses stop working or the trash collection stops? The roads aren't being fixed, which is already happening in a lot of places. What happens then? And you start to see like, oh yeah, my local government actually has a much more direct impact on me as an individual. So what I'm advocating for is, and this is what Todd's been promoting too, is really get people who are, successful business, leaders in the community. Get them to be your candidates if they believe the message of liberty, and then put them in positions of power, which I know obviously goes against to the libertarian beliefs, but I say position of power to really rein in government, let the community and the free market take over and show the value of what we can bring to communities. And we're seeing that now. I will give credit where credit's due. This past election cycle, we elected, I think it was 50 some odd libertarians across the United States for local positions.
New York,
that's a win.
7.
Yeah.
7 in New York. The election prior, 0.
Well, and that's Larry's responsibility right there. Yeah.
And one of them is a district attorney. So now you're talking
in
about
Elmira, right?
Yeah. So you have a district attorney that's a libertarian.
That's huge.
That's a big
deal. Now think about it. What's one of our biggest things we talk about? Criminal justice reform.
Criminal justice reform.
Right? And now we have a district attorney as a libertarian who can promote libertarian positions on criminal justice, and it's going to have a direct impact to that area, which is Elmira, New York. That's awesome. That's so exciting, because now people are going to be able to see that in real life, and they're going to see what happens when you give people, you know, a second chance, or you stop arresting nonviolent offenders, you stop going after the war on drugs, you focus your resources against people who are actually, you know, causing, you know, harm, who are, you know, actually hurting people.
Right.
You know, what's the expression? No victim, no crime. If
Right.
there's a victim, then yeah, go for it, right? But if there's no victim, what are we doing? And it's gonna show people like, okay,
The cost outweighs you know,
opportunity cost. Yes.
Right. I mean, think about how much it costs to put somebody through the system, defense attorney, you know, sitting in jail, feeding him, you know.
Yeah.
When it's a non-violent or non-criminal, you know, no victim, it makes a big difference. You know,
It's a huge difference.
So I'm interested to see how things are going to work in that. In that county for sure.
Me too.
So I could say there has been, I guess, success this recent on local level. But as far as a national level, 2020, where do you see? I mean, I believe that there's a bunch of people running for office. I spoke to Kim Ruff before, you know, Adam Kokesh. I mean, now you have who's the ex-Coast Guard guy? Ken. I'm drawing a blank here.
So I know the most recent was Hornberger, Jacob Hornberger, from North Carolina. But I can't remember who you're thinking of.
Anderson, not.
Oh, I know you're talking about. Yeah, I think it is Anderson. Ken Anderson? Keith? Someone? I just saw a Facebook request. I like him.
Reboot Ken 2020 is his campaign.
Okay.
Yeah. So anyway, I had a brain fart. It happens. But he's new in the race. He's traveling across the country in his car. Yeah. I have a feeling that at the convention, somebody who is not running right now is going to be the nominee.
Lincoln Chafee.
Yeah, it's I just noticed the other day he's posting going to events. He was on Larry Sharp, The Sharp Way. I could see what's happening.
Yes. That
is going to be probably the pick. And what bothers me is a lot of people are putting effort into the movement.
Mm-hmm.
Kim Ruff, especially, she's been running forever.
Yes, Kim's great.
I don't think she should be tossed aside.
Nope.
And that's the problem, because people who do like her and are endorsing her are going to go, oof, I don't like the way that this happened. Maybe this party ain't for me.
Mm-hmm.
How do we prevent that from happening? You know, retention of talent.
Yep.
And retention of people. Maybe she won't be the candidate, but maybe she'll still be wanting to be involved because she thinks that the party actually is doing something for her. But now you're throwing her, you know, this guy Chafin last second, he gets the nomination because he's the safe pick. And it's like, what have I been doing for 2 years? Why should I get involved?
I mean, what's the Libertarian Party? It's a bunch of liberty activists, and you have a couple of you know, pointed people within the movement who are in leadership trying to herd cats. I mean, that's literally what we are right now.
Right.
And I think part of the problem is because we don't really have a direct focus on what are we doing? Like, what's the goal? What are we? Why are we so concerned with who's running for office for the Libertarian Party? What's our mission, right? I mean, every campaign has a goal. It's to get elected. Is that our goal? Is our goal to get elected, or is it to educate people? And I think that's part of the problem too, is that we don't really have a singular focus. Now look at the left, right? Let's just take the Democratic Party, for example, because it's the most, you know, the most recent people can see this actually take place, you know, on display. You have Tulsi Gabbard on stage. She is, I would say, a non-interventionist Democrat, maybe leaning independent, right? You have Andrew Yang, who I dare say is an independent Democrat who has these visions of grandeur for universal basic income. You have Joe Biden, who's as establishment as they come. You have Amy Klobuchar, who's pretty much, you know, right down the middle, moderate.
I want to point out, I really like Andrew Yang as like a person.
Yes.
Right. I'm very interested, and I would like to see him get involved with things. Yeah. He's a smart guy.
He's really smart.
But the UBI thing, I can't go for, because like I just don't see. If you want to give people $1,000 a month,
right?
Okay, why not just let me keep $1,000 a month out of my paycheck by stop taxing the hell out of me?
Kevin, you're definitely following my tweets. I tweeted that a couple of months ago. Like, come on, man. Like that, it makes sense,
let me
right?
keep my money.
Right.
Why do I have to filter it through you, where you're going to spend it on bull and I just keep my $1,000 a month.
Yeah.
I'm cool with that. You know?
Now, sneak behind the curtain. Make sure you tune in next week to the Brian Nichols Show, because I actually have Max Gulker from AIER back on my show. We're going to discuss the Yang Gang. We're talking about UBI. So, in just, general consensus we came to at the end of the show. We like Andrew Yang as a person. We think he's a great guy. I would love to go have a gluten-free beer with him. However, his ideas are wacko. I mean, that's just. I mean, it is what it is. But when you look at the Democratic Party, by and large, there is a cornucopia of beliefs. How about that for Thanksgiving? We have a cornucopia of beliefs that are being represented on stage. And heck, I'll give credit where credit's due as well. Ron Paul was on stage back in 2008, 7 years after 9/11, preaching an anti-foreign intervention principled belief on stage to New York City's mayor, Rudy Giuliani. Again, 7 short years after 9/11. That's important because it shows that even the most staunch war hawks and the most staunch non-interventionists were able to have the ability to reach an entire group of people because they're using the party as a platform. The Libertarian Party has to remember it's all it is a platform. So what we need to do is really try and remember that at the same point in time that we have these different beliefs within the libertarian movement, we're still on, to use Jason Stapleton's analogy, we're on this bus floating through space, and we're all going to destination Liberty Land, right? And I don't care if you're an anarchist, a minarchist, classical liberal, paleo-conservative, like anything. I don't care. We're on our way to liberty. We are so freaking far away from that destination right now that we're just arguing of how to get there, and it's not productive. Like once we at least get within a mile of Liberty Land, like if you want to hop off the bus, then okay, but let's at least kind of get close to there. And right now, the Libertarian Party hasn't even gotten within the same stratosphere. So we need to figure out what we're trying to do, and if we're trying to actually change people's minds, bring more people into the movement, and either have electoral success or just have success from educating people, that we need to get further along as a unified group, despite our differences. So to the Kim Ruffs or the Adam Kokeshes, or heck, even the Lincoln Chafees, right? If you're on board with promoting liberty, I will, be right there with you, fighting the good fight. But it's also important to make sure that we're promoting libertarian beliefs. So I would love to see someone like Kim Ruff, who I as well had on my show, because she speaks about what it is to be a libertarian and makes it make sense, right? I would like to see Lincoln Chafee, if he is a libertarian, tell me his libertarian beliefs. Have him tell me his libertarian story, right? Because we all have the libertarian story. So I would want to hear his libertarian story. Be convincing about it. And then it comes down to, okay, Libertarian Party, establishment. What do we want? Do you want the converted Republican Democratic senator who voted for the Patriot Act to be your nominee? Or do you want a principled activist who's been a loyal member through and through throughout their career to be your nominee? Now, if you want to go towards the credible person, right, being the former U.S. senator, all right, well, are they libertarian? And I'm not doing the whole, oh, you're not a real libertarian, because obviously the answer is nobody's a real libertarian. Mm-hmm. But to at least advance the principles and the messaging, is that what our focus is? If it's to just say, we're going to have the candidate running who's the most libertarian, well, great. Guess who they're going to win? Libertarians. But we need to
win more people than just libertarians.
We need to have a really good salesperson, right, at the head of the movement. That's why Ron Paul was so successful, because if you're in sales, one of the things that you're always trying to do is promote value, right? And what did Ron Paul do so well? He promoted the value of liberty. He said, why are we sending our boys and girls overseas to fight in these endless wars? I mean, do you realize that we've been in Afghanistan longer than World War I and World War II combined? Right. Think about that, right? That's insane.
There's no end to these conflicts, because it's become a private enterprise afterwards, where the nation rebuilding, right, and having our influence involved in dictating who gets in charge and everything else, which is a big problem for me, because I was in Iraq in 2003. I've been there. I've had skin in the game, and I see the waste and what happens. And
is it wild, Kevin, that you think back? That was 16 years ago that you were there.
I know.
Isn't that wild?
Yeah,
60, like kids that were born there are just learning to drive. Like that, right. That's insane. And the fact that we haven't promoted that as something like to relate to people, on a more common basis with, is beyond me. Like, and I'm not trying to pick enemies here, but like, why are we focusing primarily on like, transgender issues right now from the Libertarian Party, right? We're like, we have our soldiers overseas in how many countries killing, we have killed or supported killing millions of innocent people. Like, that's happened. That's a factual thing. Now you can say it's the cost of war. You can say
Right.
that
Drone strikes. But this problem is that the mission of Afghanistan was to kill the Taliban and kill Al Qaeda.
right.
They're not functioning. They have a government in place. The mission's done. Come home.
Yes.
Oh well, they use fear to keep people like, oh well, maybe we need people there. No. It's a preposition base. Now we're next to Iran on both sides because you have people in Iraq, people in Afghanistan. If you can't see why those troops are still there because you're maintaining bases, who's our next enemy? Iran is in the middle. Iraq, we shouldn't have been in there in the first place because the whole war was based on weapons of mass destruction, which I don't know how many people pay attention, but if you look into the Cheney vice presidency and all the shady stuff that went on with that.
Halliburton. Oh, yeah.
Oh, my God. It's absolutely disgusting. And, the idea to send people to change regimes is a clear failure because what happened when Saddam Hussein got removed? Yes, he's an evil person. He's a piece of garbage. He murders his own people. What is the point of the UN? That's their job to fix that, to prevent mass genocide and everything. And they do nothing. That's another waste. And we decide to rip out him, but the Shiites, I talked to a congressional candidate last week who was running for Congress, who's from Syria. So he understands the tribal, the Shiites, the Sunnis, the Kurds, they're all tribes. Prior to Europe deciding, these are your borders, you have to live together, and we're appointing this guy as leader of your people. That is where the problem began, is outside influence. The problem still is outside influence. Outside influence, let them sort it out. It has nothing to do with our people, our children. I was 19, 20 years old, getting deployed overseas. I'm still like now looking back then.
You were a kid. I'm
still a kid.
Yeah.
I don't know jack shit about the world at that age. You think you do.
Yeah.
Because you're trained, like you're a Marine, you're this and that. You really don't know shit about the world. And now you're in some countries halfway around the world fighting a war because Cheney and Halliburton and all this.
And you know what? Right there, Kevin, that should be something that we preach every single day because, and again, going back to sales, right? Because that's my day job, right? I'm in sales. So, when you're promoting your different product sets, let's say, or your different values that you have, you're not going to start with the one that really is the smallest percent of your new revenue. You're not going to start with the one thing that is so minute and so small of your portfolio that it counts for like 1 or 2% of your total MRR for the year or for the month or whatever, right? Yet the Libertarian Party has seemed to make it our focus to make those small little products, if you will, be our primary focus. So instead of focusing on trying to bring or trying to do the social justice warrior approach to things, why not talk about the thing that's really the most important, the anti-war position? Because right now there is a void in the marketplace, right? You're talking about how the market works. When there's a void in the marketplace, that's the opportunity for somebody to fill that void. Right now, the left and the right aren't talking about foreign conflicts and foreign intervention. That's
foreign conflicts, national debt. Those are two of the top issues for me personally. And the third issue, which I want to get into, is the rise of socialism, which is why I'm drawn to the liberty movement, which is why I listen to shows like yours, because that is kind of scary. The further left that we go, the more of the AOCs that come in, and they are slowly. It's not an overnight process. And I had a guest on who's going to be on my premiere broadcast of the new show, Julia Song. She's a Brazilian immigrant that I didn't realize how bad Brazil was and how socialist that country is. And she starts talking about all the socialist policies that were put in place in Brazil and how since coming here and becoming an activist against socialism, she sees a lot of trending issues within our government leaning in that direction. Right. Where it's starting to erode into the socialist, democratic socialist country. And I don't know if you saw the Democratic Socialist Convention, but it was a joke. That little clip of, excuse me, privilege, whatever.
Please don't use gender-weighted language.
I can't believe people are actually joining this movement. But it is a real fear, and I want to get into that with you. the rise of socialism, people who are coming out of college, entering the workforce, they're more geared towards the idea of letting the government just handle their issues. I guess because we're lazier. That's part of the issue, because I wake up in the morning, I want to do what I want to do. I don't want anybody telling me what to do. I want to go to the gym. I want to do podcasts. I want to go to work. I want to go to the park with my kids. I make my decisions. We are okay as a society now allowing government to pick our doctors, allowing government to dictate, like basically trying to crunch down on free speech, especially on campuses. Like, you can't say that. You need to have a safe space over here. Like, things are really like changing, and it's why I'm drawn to shows like yours and listening to the guests that you have on. You just recently had on Thomas Massey.
I did, yes.
And I'm a big fan of him. I guess he's a leftover from the Tea Party conservative movement, because there's not many left. A lot of the Tea Party conservatives have left DC, and it's back to the Rhino Republican.
You know what's funny, Kevin? And I'll let you kind of continue this, but when you were talking about the debt and the wars being your biggest pet peeves, back when I was a Republican, I worked in a congressional campaign in 2012, and we were kind of running on that Tea Party message. Guess what our number one campaign thing was? The debt. Yeah. And back in 2004, what was the biggest thing that the left was promoting? Anti-war, right? So those two positions, I know that they have sentiment in the American populace, but now that they're not being represented. And that's why I was talking about the Libertarian Party is like, come on, there is a void in that market. Fill that void. Right. War and debt, and heck, we'll even say Federal Reserve, even though a lot of people don't really care about the Federal Reserve, but it's important. Make those like our three primary issues. And you're going to see, we will bring people in hand over fist. And then once they're here, we can convert them. So I guess kind of segueing to, like you were talking about, I had Thomas Massey on my show and just the show in general. That's kind of what we're trying to do, is once that you bring them in, that's when you have to teach and educate. Don't push them away. Right.
He's a sitting congressman. He's in behind the closed door meetings. He sees what's, and I've listened, and that you brought this up. Nothing. It's just not even talked about. The national debt. It's $23 trillion and rising. It's not slowing down. There's no stop to it. They got rid of the debt ceiling for the next 2 years.
Yep.
Which is insane. Like, if I don't stick to my budget, I'm eating peanut butter and jelly sandwiches for 2 weeks. Yeah. But they always have the American people to bail them out, and that's the problem. They're too dependent on just taking, and that is a big issue for me. And if socialism continues to grow, that is never going away. Eventually, just like the housing bubble burst, the national deficit is going to burst.
Oh, for sure. At this point, it's kind of like it's inevitable, right? Now it's not a matter of if, it's when.
Yeah, right. I'm waiting for it to happen.
Yeah, and part of the problem is that people have gotten away from the idea that the debt is a problem, because look at what Elizabeth Warren's running her campaign on, and this blew my mind. Her entire just healthcare plan, right? $56 trillion. It alone, it would be the largest government in the world ever. Right. Just think about that. That's just her healthcare plan alone.
Everything together and put it back for the last 100 years combined is the biggest government ever still.
And that's just the healthcare plan. That's just the healthcare plan, right? Now, and here's the part that also is insane, is that if you were to tax every American and every corporation 100%, I think it was for like 2 years, you would still not be able to pay for this for a year. Right. That's important for people to like put in perspective. Like, there is no way to make the money just grow in a magic money tree besides the Federal Reserve. But the problem is that once you start to let that money grow in the Federal Reserve money tree, the money becomes worthless because it's not being backed by anything. It's going to be insane what happens when this all crumbles. Because I honestly, I think what they're going to do is just say the debt, we're going to just pretend it never happened and start over. I think that's kind of where it's going to go. But
bankrupt. Can the government claim bankruptcy? I don't know. We're going to find out. Who are they going
to claim bankruptcy from? China, right?
Right. And how much of the debt do they owe? They owe a lot of our debt.
Right.
And so what happens? So we become, because that is what China is doing right now, which people don't realize. They're going into these countries in Africa, countries that have terrible economies, and say, look, we're going to build your schools. We're going to build your roads. But you're just going to owe us the money. It's an IOU.
An IOU, yep.
Right. But yet now everything's built by China. They owe them. So when China says, oh, by the way, you owe us $4 trillion. We're going to build a couple of military bases here, and we're going to expand our empire.
It's like in The Office with Andy and Dwight. I'm not sure if you watch The Office that much, but there's a scene in The Office. Yeah,
I used to watch it, yeah.
Okay, so Andy and Dwight, and Dwight's trying to get Andy to always owe him one, right? And then they're going back and forth who can one up the other person for an IOU, because they wanted to hold it as leverage when the time came. Hey, you owe me, so here's what you're going to do. That's exactly what China's doing, 100%.
Right. So and people need to be careful, because that's some scary shit. I want to get into a couple things before we wrap up.
Yep.
Technology and free speech, I guess, and tech and misinformation. So let's put that together. You've talked about this. I talk about it a lot.
Yep.
The idea of free speech, and then you're mixing in the new platforms, Twitter, Facebook, and social media. They are private companies.
Yep.
Are they considered like the new town hall, though, where it's where people meet, and we have to be careful of what we say? Can they regulate what you say? Because, for example, and I've noticed, and I don't know if you noticed the same thing, I feel like conservatives and the people like Cash Jackson, who have made comments on Twitter, get removed a lot quicker than some people who are on the left. And I've actually had she ran for Congress in Colorado. She's a Democrat. I can't remember her name off the top of my head, but she said some outlandish stuff. I'm like, this is insane. And she was reported, nothing happened to her. Her stuff stayed up for a very long time. And I was like following whoever reporter kept on posting, look, her tweets are still up, and nothing's happening. And is there a difference depending on how you lean? And should it be regulated like free speech?
So the second part of your question, absolutely not. But number one, the question in terms of, is there a bias? Not even a doubt. Like there's 100% a bias from the social media platforms. And I mean, one look no further when Joe Rogan had Jack Dorsey, I forget her name, but she was
the lawyer that was with him, right?
Yeah. And then Tim Pool on his show. And Tim Pool is a self-described, I think is he Democrat socialist? I guess reframe him as
progressive. I guess they call he calls himself a progressive.
But even Tim Pool was calling out Twitter for their BS, because he's like, no, you promote that you don't have a bias. But then when we look at these, as you mentioned, these examples, side by side comparisons. Here's one person saying something that's completely out of left field and that goes against your guidelines, but it's a Republican who says it and they're out. Versus it's the leftist who says the exact same thing. And actually, wasn't it Candace Owens? And I'm not cheering her one way or another, but I think she was trying to do this to prove a point, where she took a tweet from somebody and it was about hating all white people or doing something like that. And she herself, a black lady, tweeted this but changed the words white to black. Right. And I think it was within a couple of minutes all those tweets were flagged.
Right.
And that right there, she was trying to point out the hypocrisy. So is there a bias? 100%. Should it be regulated by the federal government? Absolutely not, because all that does is open the door for government to become the police on what is and is not permitted to be said. Right. So we need to remember that it's important to let the most vile speech exist, because as soon as you start to ban that speech, what happens? It goes underground, right? And what's the best form of disinfectant? Sunlight. So in order to make sure that people see just how terrible these ideas are, we need to make sure that those people are allowed to keep promoting those ideas, because then we can beat them on the battle place and marketplace of ideas. And once you push it underground, it's just going to become a festering cancer that's going to be existing and growing, but behind the scenes. And we see organizations kind of rise up to those censorships, like a Gab. Now, obviously, Gab was not built on being this place for the alt-right to kind of exist. It was built much more as a free speech platform, but at the same point in time, as a direct result of Twitter and Facebook and named social media platform here, who's been showing a true observable bias against the right, whether they are conservatives, libertarians, Republicans, that group of people are now going to these alternative forms of media that exist. And it's kind of like this back door where the worst of those people now being able to formulate their ideas, but they're doing it in secret almost. So I think Twitter and Facebook don't realize that they're going out of their way to censor these people are actually making things worse. And on the right, that would also be true if the government were to do that, because as soon as you're putting the government in charge of dictating what is and is not allowed, once the party flips, whoever's in control, you know damn well it's going to be used against the other side. So
Right.
I think what we need to do is not look to not to filter what's being allowed in the court of public opinion, be it in favor or against one particular speech or trying to enforce fairness, but rather just encourage the existing platforms to be as open and transparent as possible. And if they don't react to that, then look for alternatives. And we are seeing alternatives pop up. I mean, you're seeing, like I mentioned before, Gab or Minds. These open source free speech avenues are existing and they're growing. And there's going to come a time if like the Twitters and the Facebooks of the world don't stop what they're doing, where their user base is just going to turn against them, and they're going to look for those alternatives. And that's when heck, if you think back to 2006, 2007, MySpace was the monopoly, right? And then Facebook just came out of nowhere. Now, people said back in the day, MySpace, should the government regulate MySpace because it's the only game in town, because it technically was a monopoly. Well, no, because the market took over and it basically made MySpace irrelevant.
Right.
That's going to happen. I mean, Uber happened within the past 5 years, and it pretty much has made the taxi industry completely useless. You're looking at Lyft and joining the marketplace there. Airbnb is making hotels have to compete, and
Right.
you're seeing the marketplace have the answer to these very difficult questions at times. So I think putting government regulation into the trying to promote free speech, air quotes,
Right.
free speech, is just going to make the problem worse, because we have history show us anytime you get the government involved, it does make things worse. Just let the marketplace do what it needs to do. And either Twitter has to react to what its users want, or they're going to get left by the wayside and somebody will fill that void.
And a lot of, I guess, because fear is always used when the government wants to intervene in anything, or
Always.
so they always use like a fear angle.
Yep.
And that angle right now is misinformation.
Yes.
How do you determine what misinformation is? How do you fact check that? Because if I post something on Twitter and someone says, that's misinformation.
Yep.
How do you know? You don't know me. You don't know what my argument's about. I'm talking about something that's happening in my town, and you're telling me from DC that that's just some right-wing conspiracy or something. So who decides what misinformation is in this new technology age? That's where we kind of, how do we get that? How do we decide what that is?
Right. And honestly, it's going to come down to the marketplace. I mean, and it sounds such like a cop-out answer, but I mean, think about it, right?
Right.
Why does PolitiFact exist? Because people wanted somebody to kind of be an objective answer to what's being promoted by main media source here. But PolitiFact obviously has started to lean left. So what happens? You have right-wing fact checkers start to come out. And then you'll have organizations who are looking at the left-wing fact checkers and the right-wing fact checkers and try to, find, where's the common ground. So one of my go-to, analogies is, if you start reading a news article, is this an analogy, a metaphor? I don't know. Just do this. I guess this works. If you're reading an article, right, from National Review, and then you go read an article about the same topic from Vox, look for where the lines in the articles are the same. That's the truth. Right. And that's, I mean, I'm confident there's going to be somebody who kind of is going to fill that void in the marketplace. It's just a matter of, do we pay attention to them? And right now it seems that this polarized approach to things has been winning out. And that's why you have such, there's a graph I saw, or there's a GIF rather. And what it did was it showed people from the left and the right. And it's very, very basic in how they split the people, but pretty much left and right. And you saw like where they used to agree, like in the 50s, and they were like all meshed together. And you see, every 4 years it just started to break apart. And now it's just like you have these two completely opposite polarized areas competing with each other. And there is no dialogue between one another. And I think a lot of that honestly is not so much due to that our ideas are changing, but what we're being allowed to promote from the corporate media, like what the narrative that's being promoted. And I think you look at what the corporate media promotes as truth versus what is the truth, or just, can we get somebody else out there to promote what they think is the truth that's contrary to what the corporate media is saying? Well, what happens? The corporate media calls them fake news, and then it turns into this battle of, what's the truth as it's said by the corporate media, and what's the truth as it's said by the independent media. And I think that's why we have such a split in America, because the left has kind of gravitated more towards the corporate truth, and the right has kind of gravitated more towards this counterculture. I remember back, don't believe the liberal media. That was newsbusters.com. That was like their big thing, and they had bumper stickers everywhere. That's still true today, and that was 10 years ago. So this sentiment of media bias has been existing, and it's gotten worse, especially since the days of the Cronkites of the world, the days of the Dan Rathers of the world, Brian Williams. We're seeing that split really has exacerbated itself in 2019, because now you have those alternative voices like Ben Shapiro or Jordan Peterson and Dave Rubin, Glenn Beck. But then you also have a subset, right? The Nick Fuentes of the world, the Milo Yiannopoulos of the world. And that's partly why those voices even exist, is because they're reaching out to an entirely different group of people who are being forgotten. And that's why, again, this idea we have to censor what is and is not allowed is so dangerous, because then it creates this subset of, the alt-rights of the world to then foster, this sentiment of hatred and resentment. And it expresses itself in very negative and sometimes, very damaging ways. So we got to be aware that unintended consequences are real, whether it's in foreign policy or it's in, government trying to regulate speech, whatever it may be. Unintended consequences are always real, which is why instead of having the government try to say, this is how it's going to be because we say it's going to be this way, let the marketplace kind of, move things on its own as the supply and demand start to fluctuate. If there's a supply for more and more truth in the world, there's going to be or rather, if there's a demand for it, there's going to be naturally somebody that's going to fill that void and fill that supply side of it. Whether it's another news organization or organizations who exist try to change the way that they're approaching the news. Heck, we saw CNN. They took a much more hard left approach with Trump starting in 2016. And when you watch them for the Republican primaries, I'd say they were kind of objective in terms of trying to present each individual candidate with some fairness. But once Trump became president, it was hardline anti-Trump 100% of the time. And that's why they become so resented by the right. So anything that's promoted by somebody on the left, from a CNN article, it's instantly labeled by the right as fake news. Whereas on the contrary, what happened for the 8 years under Obama? Who was the alternative there? Fox, right? So the left, they look at Fox News as the way that the right looks at CNN. So you have two completely different ways of looking at the world. I actually just saw this graphic today. I was talking about the impeachment proceedings. I forget the gentleman who was being interviewed during the proceedings, but CNN's their what's the little thing at the bottom of the screen called? I forget the name of it.
The ticket runner thing? Yeah,
it was like what it said there was this damning evidence shows exactly the quid pro quo. And then the Fox News one was like, this interview showed that there was no quid pro quo and that Trump didn't ask for quid pro quo. And it's like, okay, that's where we are. This is 2019, right? You're two people seeing the exact same thing.
Right. CNN keeps showing the opening statement of, and then Fox is showing the questioning portion where they question and the statement is different. So like there's two different, and that's why perception is huge, and how everything's perceived now is. And I feel like everyone's wearing glasses that are fogging up constantly. There's always that.
But that's why Joe Rogan's so successful, right? Because instead of having these 30-second bits where he's showing one part of the recording and the other side showing the other part of the recording, he's just saying, okay, we're gonna have a 3-hour conversation about this, and we're gonna play everything in its entirety and have a conversation about it.
And he does it live, so there's no editing, so there's nothing but the truth. And I'm Joe Rogan all the way when it comes to some of his podcasts are absolutely amazing because they go educational to laughing your ass off, and I'm a big fan of
his Alex Jones one. Like, I don't care what your opinion is on Alex
Jones. I couldn't stop watching.
Oh my God,
stop watching.
It was like when when Alex Jones just goes, well, you know what, I'm kind of an idiot, and Rogan just lost his shit. He just starts I mean, like, if you didn't have like a belly laugh at that point, like, are you human? Do you have a pulse?
I mean, look, we don't have to agree with the guy, but like, I couldn't stop watching it 5 hours. It took me 4 days to get through the whole thing. I'm listening on my way to work.
It's like a 4-hour interview.
It's insane. But that's what I love, and that's what I love about podcasts. And I want to wrap up with your podcast, the Brian Nichols Show. What is the future of your show? The outlook for your show, and do you have a future in politics? Are you going to maybe take that leap one day? Do you see a future in getting further involved, not just on the communication side, because you're a great communicator, you deliver a message, you deliver educated opinions. There may be something in for the future of Brian Nichols, candidate. Is that something in the future?
Well, how about this? We'll start with my show, right? What's the future of my show? We're going to keep on having great guests on. My goal is, as I mentioned at the beginning of the show, I want my audience to leave feeling they've been educated, enlightened, and informed. So my goal is to continue to have people on who are not only going to challenge my audience beliefs, to challenge my beliefs, but I want to have people on my show and maybe do a couple more, not debates, but just an open dialogue to have, somebody on the left have a conversation with somebody on the right and kind of just have them almost hash out their differences on air together. I think that's going to be productive, right? And we've seen that on shows. I don't know about you, but like I get a lot of value out of like the Soho forum, right? That's done by Reason. I get a lot of value when Dave Smith, I'm part of the problem, will have on, Ben Burgess to discuss their differences of opinion when it comes to libertarian / anarchism to, democratic socialism or just full on socialism. I get a lot more value out of that because I get to hear someone challenge my beliefs, but to the contrary, I get to hear my side go against their beliefs. But then I can kind of hear, okay, which one is going to win in my mind in terms of the merits of the argument. And I think that's going to be more productive also for my show going forward is to have more of those kind of conversations, real form, with people from both sides on at the same time, instead of just, me having on a democratic socialist or me having on a conservative. So I'm looking for those kind of interviews, but also having more people, who are leaders and really big thinkers, not so much in the political movement, but in the marketplace, in whether it's being entrepreneurs or being leaders of nonprofits. I mean, I've had Caleb Franz on my show from Liberty with the Liberty Initiative, which is focusing on what he calls the reintegration project. So taking nonviolent offenders who are leaving jail and having companies not ask them whether or not they are felons, and not disqualifying them just from the onset of them leaving prison and looking for a job. So people like Caleb, I've had people like Jeremy Kaufman, who was the creator of, library.io. It's an open source, which I'm not at all on a level that he can talk about it, but it's an open source blockchain community where basically it's going to be an alternative to like the YouTubes of the world or the Facebooks of the world. So I'm really interested in having those people on because I think that's going to be more productive in terms of trying to promote liberty from a marketplace idea is continuing to have people on with their new ideas and with these new inventions that they're coming out with and showing people what the impact is in real people's lives. But also having people, obviously in politics, because that's kind of what the show also focuses on is the political side of things. So, I've had Congressman Justin Amash on my show back this past summer, having Congressman Massey on my show has been a lot of fun this past week. And looking at other people who are, within politics, and even if they're not necessarily on my side. I mean, I had Keith Rubino, who was running for New York State Assembly back last year on my show, or I guess it was last year. It was back in like September 2018, and he was running for Assembly as a Democrat. And just to kind of ask him a lot of pointed questions of where I had some flaws in his arguments, but to hear him kind of say what he would do if he was in office, and to really put a lot of heat to the fire, or what's the expression?
Feet to the fire.
Feet to the fire. Yeah, there we go.
Yeah.
Put their feet to the fire when it comes to, are your ideas truly going to work? Are they objectively something you can measure in their success? It's great to say you're against waste. What are you going to do when you're going to fight waste? Like where are you fighting the waste from? What are the unintended consequences of your policies in not only what they're going to be in 2019 or 2020 if you're elected, but what has happened in the past? What was the result of prohibition? Why didn't we learn from that when you talk about the war on drugs? Little things like that is putting these politicians on record and trying to get them to walk through their own ideas and stuff a little bit. And I also think good to learn where they came from and how they got to where they are, just because I think that will speak to more of why they vote the way they do. Now, in terms of me, I don't know. I mean, I'm not looking to pursue anything right now. I'm pretty happy with my job that I have and such. And politics is nasty, man. I was in politics for years, and I worked on campaigns, and just to see the stuff behind the scenes that takes place, it makes you say, I want to be as far away from that kind of stuff as possible, because you see a lot
almost,
of good people.
It's almost degrading. It's almost like
is.
it's, you know, they belittle you. They try to find as much dirt on you.
Look what they did to
even if it's
Larry.
true
I mean,
or
they
not.
try to destroy Larry up in New
Right.
York. And like, what really hurt me to see, especially in New York with Larry, was like, there was a guy who I worked with back in 2010 on a couple of campaigns of his. I actually like worked for him, and he was going out his way saying that Larry was only running because he was going to be running in 2020 for the Libertarian nomination for president, and he was just a stepping stone. I'm like, I have a picture of me and you standing together during your election night, man. Like, what are you doing? Like, that was very disappointing to me. To see, like, even the people who I thought were the good guys back in the day, they play the same game. So I think my role is more focused on trying to bring people on and you know, communicate the message of liberty and hopefully bring people into the movement. I like to use this analogy a lot, right? Is that in any industry, you have your salespeople and you have your engineers. And, you know, the engineers are what are they? You know, if you're in a nonprofit, you have your fundraisers and you have your people who are actually doing the work, like your educators and stuff. That's true in what we're doing in the Liberty Movement as well. You need to have your salespeople and you need to have your engineers. And the engineers are the people who you could say, tell me all about iPencil. And they can regurgitate that thing, you know, from the top of their head instantaneously. I can't do that because that's not how my brain works. But I can take that, you know, Spark Notes version of iPencil, and I can talk to somebody and give them, you know, kind of like what Julie Borowski did with Nobody Knows How to Make a Pizza, right? Talk about these ideas of liberty and how they actually have an impact in the real marketplace. Like, that's what we need more of. We need more of the people who can take the concepts of liberty, the principles, and explain them to the people, you know, by and large, that we're not talking to on a day-to-day basis, and show them how valuable it is. And then once they're here, let the engineers start to do their work, be the educators, start to teach people, and don't push them away, right? Like, I think Larry actually says this too. He's like in the Larry Sharp, let me bring them to you. Once they're here, you go ahead and you train them. Like, that's what Larry, that's 100% what he's been doing. And we see in New York, it works. Like, it works, right? We see people in New York State registering for Libertarian.
Copy, paste.
All over. Larry
Do it
Sharp.
everywhere.
Yes.
But just the ideas, just the, I guess, the structure that he's brought, because he came from the business sector and he's built a structure here where, and I've asked him and I've talked to him as early, like about a week ago, I had a conversation with him. It's about, he wants people to get in a team, not just run just to run. No, build a team, get a team together, do it the right way. You know, it's not an easy trek. Don't do it if you can't dedicate a certain amount of time, because then it's just a waste. He wants people that actually could build a team and run serious campaigns. And that's something that's been lost in the past, where it's just like people, I've seen it in this past election here on the local level, just throwing the names on the ballot to get their names on the ballot. Not for anything else, not to make a serious run. And I agree with him. A lot of people, the older libertarians, do not like him because he's bringing change, and people are scared of change.
And you know what? And this is the one thing too. You're gonna have people who are not pure libertarians in the liberty movement to start. Like, once they initially take that step from being a conservative or a liberal or what have you into liberty, it's gonna take time. Like, I cannot stress this enough. For everybody in the movement, think about your story. Like, how long did it take you, and how much did you have to do in terms of research on your own to get to where you are today? That's going to be true for other people too. And that's why every time I have a guest in my show, I ask them their liberty story, because I think it's important for people to keep that in mind. Like, this is how it works, and it works like that for everybody. So don't be so quick to say to somebody, you're not a real libertarian, get out of our movement, right? And you know, that's why I'll give Lincoln Chafee a shot. I mean, Larry gave Lincoln Chafee a shot. That's why he was on his show. Because, you know,
I want to hear more from him.
Yes, because if I hear from him that he's had a true change of heart, like, you know, rest in peace, Walter Jones, former congressman, like, he voted for the Iraq War, and then he saw what it did, and he then became one of, if not the most anti-war members of Congress. Like, went and I forget how many soldiers he spoke to like basically apologize. Because he was so ashamed of what he had done in voting for that war. Like, if you had that kind of come to Jesus moment, come on in. You're my ally. And I would want to hear that from somebody like a Lincoln Chafee. But don't just push him away. Now, Bill Weld, he said he was going to be a libertarian for life, and this, that, and the other thing. And then all of a sudden, you know, as soon as he lost, he's out the door, right?
He's running as a Republican, trying to primary. Trump up in New Hampshire
and running on non-libertarian ideals. I mean,
Right.
he basically was saying that Trump's foreign policy.
Don't be surprised. Don't be surprised if you don't see him at the Libertarian Convention on that stage. I'm calling it right now.
I wouldn't be surprised if he took it. You know, he took his GOP run. He's like, see, I can reach out to a bunch of different people. Like, no, but you ran on basically non-libertarian policies as a Republican. Like, no, and that's why
that's the problem right there.
100% the problem. Like, we need people who are genuine, people who actually believe what we believe, and promote those ideals. That's why we need to have a strong candidate, not only from a credibility standpoint, but also from a principled standpoint. Which is why, I mean, I'm just saying, in my ideal world, a Justin Amash would be perfect because he has the credibility of, you know, being a member of Congress, but also has the principles that we believe that he represents. And I mean, I've had him on my show and I asked him pointed questions about his principles, and he's a libertarian through and through. Like, and that's something that we need as a party to be taken seriously on a national level, as somebody who is taken seriously already. And that would be somebody like a Justin Amash, which, you know, I would love to see, fingers crossed, but I don't know what's going to happen there. But yeah. I asked him on my show.
I know. I heard. I listened to that one specifically because
he said, "Would you support me?" I'm like, "Well, 100%." He goes, "Okay."
Yeah. Well, I want to remind everybody that is watching this episode on YouTube to subscribe. Hit that subscribe button down below. And if you're listening to the audio version on iTunes, Spotify, iHeartRadio, hit the subscribe button. Give her ratings. The more ratings, the more exposure the show gets. The more exposure our guests get. And Brian Nichols is a great guest. Brian, tell everybody how to get your show on their podcast, download your show. Where do they find?
So BrianNicholsShow.com is where you can find every single episode, but you can get the show from any podcast catcher you have. So, I mean, I use Podcast Addicts, but you can use Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify. It's everywhere. So just Google the Brian Nichols Show. You'll find it. But as for me, if you want to follow me on social media, I'm on Twitter and on Facebook, both at B Nichols Liberty. Twitter is definitely where I spend a lot of my time for social commentary, political commentary, and Facebook is more dedicated towards sharing funny memes and that kind of stuff. Pick your poison if you want. Go both, please. You'd be a great supporter. Go both. But yeah, if you enjoy the show, I would love folks to hit that subscribe button. And obviously, I always encourage people during the episodes to share with family and friends. That's honestly how we reach more people. And whether it's an episode you feel passionate about, or an episode you think somebody could learn from something that was talked about in the show, every little bit helps. So I want to thank you, Kevin. Obviously, you were a guest on my show before, and to reach out to people in that way, that was really cool to have you on. But thank you again for having me on your show. So I'm reaching new people that I maybe haven't talked to yet. So if they enjoy what they hear today, I would love the subscribe over on my show, or just a 5-episode challenge would be pretty cool. Like, just listen to 5 episodes. If you think what you listen to is valuable, then you can become one of our fun supporting listeners here at the Brian Nichols Show. So I appreciate everything that you've been doing to help me promote my show. And also, I'm hoping I can do the same, reciprocate some on my end. That's how we win the future, man.
Yep, and I appreciate you taking the time. And I do want to mention that if you do listen to Brian Nichols Show and you do support him, he does have a Patreon page.
I do.
And to support him that way, because we are competing against the mainstream media that is backed by corporate interests. This is why I like doing podcasts, because we create the narrative, we run the show, and no outside influence. It's just us having a conversation. And I recommend everybody continue to follow us and subscribe to our shows and sticking with the Liberty movement. So thank you very much, Brian, for coming on, and I appreciate it. And I'll see you soon.
All right. Thanks.
Thanks, buddy.
Hey guys, I hope you enjoyed that video. Subscribe to the show, like it, and comment. Also, if you want the audio version because you're traveling, you're in a car, and you can't watch it, you don't have time to watch the episodes, you could go in the show notes. There is a link provided. Stitcher, iTunes, iHeartRadio, whatever your pleasure may be. Join me and listen via the audio versions on those other platforms, okay? But I really like YouTube. I like the way it's working out. And if you can, subscribe. The more subscribers, the better the content I can provide you, and it costs you nothing. So I appreciate it. Thanks, guys. I'll see you next time.